Hello, everyone. Woo! I'm so excited today because I have one of my very best friends on the podcast. I have been trying to get her to come on for a while now, and it finally lined up timing wise. But I
Mhm.
have my friend Chloe Tagan here, and she is, well, let me start by introducing her, all of her cool credentials, because she's a licensed mental health therapist, LMHC
Yep.
counselor,
Mhm.
LMHC
Yep.
to start. She is also a Shine dance fitness instructor, which is one of my personal favorite credentials. She's also an ordained clergy of earth-based spirituality, so that's cool. She's taking classes in Jungian tarot card reading right now, also cool. And hold on, I got it. Oh, there's like fascia maneuvering certification that you're getting right now too. Yeah. So she's very holistic in nature, in her approach to mental health, which I love and we nerd out about all the time. So consider this conversation just an eavesdropping of two little wellness girlies who used to be retired party or big party girls. So we'll talk about our evolution from big partiers to mental health specialists. It's a surprisingly common path that we take, I think, many of us. So, hello, Chloe.
Hi, Katie. I'm so excited to be here with you. I know we've been talking about wanting to do this for a long time, and it's just, I consider you a really, really, really close, near and dear friend to my heart, and I'm really glad to just be here with you and spend some time. Again, honestly, just like we're girlfriends, chatting about life. It's one of my favorite things to do. So, thanks for having
Mm.
me.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I know it's definitely so beautiful having sisterhood and friendships where you resonate across so many different planes. And I think that in the past like 5 years, I've really been able to form some special bonds throughout my own like sober curious journey and healing, and you're definitely one of them. So I'm so happy you're here. And I wanted to start, I thought it would be funny by like talking about how some of the first times we met and how we weren't necessarily in alignment and how we reconnected over the years. And so, yeah. Let's talk about how we first met.
Yeah, so okay, let's rewind several years. I don't know exactly what year that would have been, but
What
um
year would it have been? So, okay, 2020. It was probably like 2015,
yeah, probably somewhere around.
2014.
Yeah. So I mean, the long and short of it is Katie is from Martha's Vineyard, little island
Yeah.
called Martha's Vineyard. I am not from there, but I lived there off and on in the summers for many, many, many years. I think it's 9 years to be total. I was there from 2011 until 2019, the end of 2019. And in the last 3 years, I lived there year round. But prior to that, I was just a
Summer.
summer girl. I was just one of those wash ashore kids, as they call it. Going there every summer. I got a waitressing job and at a place that we both have worked at. And yeah, I just loved it. It's a childhood home vacation spot for me. My family went to Martha's Vineyard throughout my
Mm.
childhood. So it was really meaningful for me to actually like go and just live there for a while. But I was living on Martha's Vineyard, so probably, yeah, maybe around 2014, 2015, something like that. And I would encounter and run into Katie at parties
Yeah.
because at the point in my life and in your life, we were
It-
both on kind of parallel paths, I guess you could say. Um, I'll just to speak for myself when I say, I was really in a place at that point in my life where alcohol and drinking were top priorities. And we can get into kind of what that means and what that represents and what that symbolized for me. But, being in my early to mid, well, like early to mid 20s at that point,
Yeah.
there was a lot about, I guess, a lot about myself that I was kind of running away from.
Hmm.
And I realized it several years later when I eventually made the decision to stop drinking and take alcohol pretty much almost fully out of my life. That's really where that sober curiosity kind of started for me. I didn't even know that that's what it was. But yeah, when we met, I would say I was sort of I say this with a lot of love. I was really kind of an underdeveloped, immature version of myself.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's not to speak badly about myself, because that part of myself I've learned to cultivate and love and accept and um, just really honor that part of me.
Yeah.
But there was a lot that I was searching and seeking for through the use of substances like alcohol. Um, and really, I think what it came down to was really wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to be acknowledged, wanting to feel accepted, and a big part of it was wanting to kind of like um, be cool in a way
Yeah.
and to connect with people around me that I thought were really fascinating and interesting people. And, living on Martha's Vineyard every summer for me was like this big adventure of like leaving this teeny tiny town that I grew up in another part of Massachusetts, but then going to this island that just felt like so magical and
Mm.
secluded from all of the stuff that home kind of like represented to me. And Martha's Vineyard as an idea for me was kind of interesting because I had such a childhood connection to that place that just being able to live there, even if I had to work every single day throughout the summer to pay my rent because it was so expensive to live there, it was like a really meaningful kind of like little dream come true for me to just be near the beach every day and to get to meet new people. And for me, I was like in my element in terms of social capacity because I am very social in a lot of ways and would love to get to know new people. So you and I have met probably at parties, we knew of each other.
Our drunken, wounded selves paths crossed many times at parties.
Many times at parties, and we've talked about this in the past. I think there is even like a little bit of like an unconscious at the time, like known but like conscious competitiveness in a way.
Mhm.
I felt that way with a lot of women at that age. I think at that point in my life, I probably had very few female friends that I didn't feel like I was trying to compete with.
Wow.
Um, I didn't understand how, like damaging that actually was at the time.
Yeah.
But there must have been something about you that, I felt triggered by or something. And I remember feeling that way with a lot of women,
Yeah.
seeing them or liking a quality about them, or maybe they were popular, or maybe they had like a quality or something that I really wanted.
Hmm.
And that would turn into jealousy for me.
Yeah.
Um, would turn into like pettiness, right? As women can do. I feel like a lot of women don't like to talk about this, but the pettiness in the female world is a very real phenomenon, and I think we all kind of get caught in it at some point, and it takes our willingness and awareness to kind of pull ourselves out of that a little bit. So, I think there was, we were both we were both drinking a lot, we were both partying a lot, we were both in environments where there was a lot of that going on. And as you know, those environments can get really confusing really quickly. They're very messy. They're like, I don't mean just physically, but mentally and emotionally kind of messy, right?
Oh,
There's a
yeah.
lot of behaviors and triggers and things that come out in those moments when you're in an environment where everybody is, under the influence in some capacity. So that's how we met.
Yeah.
And then, years later, I'm trying to even think of like when that would have been, probably like maybe 2019, even like when I moved off of Martha's Vineyard on 2019, and then moved back to the town that I grew up in, which is where I reside now. And I think you might have reached out to me at one point and we had a Zoom call and connected, and you were just so, I think we had talked maybe before that, but just intermittently. I had started a coaching business at the time, and there was a lot going on with me. Like fast forward, lots of my own deep reflection about my process of drinking and partying and all of those days, and really trying to release and let a lot of that go. Also, at the time, feeling a lot of shame and confusion for that, trying to learn how to fit in with people socially while trying to get away from alcohol use, which was very complicated and confusing for me for a while. Um, and I think you reached out to me, really lovely, and we had a nice conversation and connected more about our similar interests that, I had studied health coaching, so were you, and nutrition and all of these things. We had a lot of interests in common.
Yeah.
And you were also starting your own business at the time. I don't know if that would have been the same year that you started your business, but somewhere around there.
Hmm.
And um, I think from there, we've had a really budding, like beautiful, grounded, non-competitive, lovely relationship as girlfriends. I think we both had to go through probably our own like maturation process that that everyone has to go through in order to get to a place where now I think of you as like one of my biggest cheerleaders, and I love cheering you on. And, you know, I,
Yeah.
I feel, there's a lot of like details on the way in that story, but I feel like I've really been able to heal that part of myself with women specifically, of feeling like I
Yeah.
don't have to compete with women anymore. And I can just really step into a place where I am who I am. And the women that want to support me and cheer me on will kind of make themselves known, and the ones that don't will kind of fall away. So that's kind of like a short version of that story, but there was so many details in the middle of that. Probably a lot of things maybe you remember that I don't.
Yeah. I mean, I think you did such a wonderful job of explaining and so graciously just sharing about your own process with competition amongst women. It's so common yet not talked about enough. I think that feeling of I probably subconsciously a lot of times for people where, especially women, I think there is a level of pettiness and cattiness that's societally perpetuated by, whatever the case may be, like normalized competition amongst women, the patriarchy, whatever, you know? But a lot of things about what you said stood out to me, just particularly how gracious and just beautifully you shared about that in such an open way. I feel like a lot of women are afraid to admit that they do get intimidated or insecure around other women. And one of the biggest things I think is the antidote to that is the healing you mentioned and really doing what works for you and getting confident and comfortable in your own skin. And I can totally relate to that, where maybe being more triggered by other women I saw historically or feeling competitive with people. Whereas, like, as I chose to just stop looking outward, focus on myself and my own happiness, I realized, like, once I'm to a place of happiness, that doesn't really matter. And you can only get to a place of happiness when you stop comparing yourself to everyone around you. And so it's just so cool to see how the layers of healing can have such a ripple effect and just cultivating more really resonant relationships and supportive relationships, and how you develop that self-awareness to realize and admit, wow, I was competitive with other women, but also that healing allows you to get to a place where you exude happiness for other women because you're happy within. And so all of what you said, I totally can relate to. And details that I remember is like, yeah, same, like just Junkin. I felt like clicky is the word that comes to mind. Like, I feel like girl, like that age of early 20s, you should feel like territorial and like clicky with your little group of friends. And like, oh, is this an outsider and whatever. Although I feel like growing up, I was pretty, growing up, I wouldn't have considered myself to be like a cliquey kind of girl, but I definitely was an obnoxious drunk. And I'm sure could have been very like overbearing or triggering. And I think so, that's definitely there's so many aspects of like who we used to be where it's like, oh, gotta just show her a little love. But Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember being self-aware enough when you were starting your business. Like, I know we had little like weird interactions and stuff, but there was really nothing other than just a lack of connection, and like almost like we were guarded towards each other. But then I remember I moved off island, you moved, I was in Somerville and I was getting my master's in nutrition. And I remember seeing introspective living and your work. And I do remember feeling like, oh, I'm kind of jealous of this. And I was on that brink of like subconscious jealousy coming to the surface and being like, no, that's what you want to be doing. And like, you should honor her for that and like tell her this is really cool because I feel like so many people don't do that and they just sit there like, whatever. Who does she think she is? Fuck her. She's doing something I want to be doing. Like, to be honest, so many people are like that. And it's been very revealing starting a business of my own, how many people that you think are your friend or would be supportive that aren't. You're like, oh, okay, cool. So I remember reaching out then and we chatted, and I was just like, oh, it's really cool what you're doing. But that was it. And then in 2020, we connected with lots going on in the world and feeling like we may be on the same page. And then from there, the rest was history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's nice to hear your rendition of it too, because obviously we were having similar but different experiences. And then from then, so much has happened in the world. There's been, I think, way more to bond about and connect with.
Yeah. And even our paths of education and the world and our own
Right.
awakening process to the world and how we see the world and how we view sisterhood and how we view the evolution of ourselves. I really do feel so soulfully connected to you. And I feel very grateful to have relationships like that in my life. It makes the world feel a lot more manageable.
I agree, especially as women, I think we need sisterhood. You talk about this a lot. We need places where we can go, where we can connect with other women that are actually genuinely wanting us to do well. I mean, I
Yeah.
I really do remember you reaching out to me at that time and saying like, I think it's really cool what you're doing with your business. And I remember thinking like, wow, that was that was so kind of her to do. She didn't have to do that.
Mhm.
Like that takes a conscious effort to reach out and to say to somebody, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing and I have similar interests and have this, vision for myself. It takes a level, I think, of humility to do that, and I've learned how to do that. And for anybody who's listening that, has a similar sort of like woman wound, like female sisterhood wound, because I think a lot of women struggle with this, but it's often not talked about. Um, I think it's just a really good reminder that there's still moments and times where I feel jealous of other women. It's
Oh
not
yeah,
like that
same.
totally goes away or it's completely gone. And, we can talk about that if you want, but there's definitely still moments where that happens to me. But that's really an opportunity, like you just talked about, which reminded me to reframe and to go, wait a minute, she kind of just has something that I really want and that I think is really amazing and I want for me. And because I want that for me, that means that I need to kind of like look at that jealousy in the mirror and actually kind of accept that part of me that is feeling a little bit like maybe hesitant to start or not good enough or whatever the internal voice is telling you. But I think it's a really good reminder that that still happens to me. I'm still very human. I still have moments. I actually had a moment even recently meeting a new group of women where I was feeling very kind of
Insecure.
strange and uncomfortable, like some inklings of old stuff coming up for me. And that was really an opportunity for me to pause and step back and really go back and look at those parts of myself that need some attention and think about like what path am I on right now? Am I getting caught up in just like my ego wanting to look a certain way in front of people? Or, can I bring it back to a place that feels really genuine for me? So this
Yeah.
process takes a lot of self-reflection. And I've really appreciated hearing your self-reflections about female friends and other experiences you've gone through. And, it's very resonant. And I think it's something that probably most women have gone through or experienced, but whether they feel comfortable talking about it or not is kind of another story. But I think it's a really very real phenomenon that
Yeah.
women feel competitive with other women and learning how to break that cycle, in our generation and really just connect with women in a place that's from genuine, love and wanting them to do well. Because when we want others to do well, we also are kind of respecting ourselves more too. So really holding that mirror up of, yeah, just appreciating people from a genuine perspective. So I
Yeah.
love that we can talk about that and that I feel, so comfortable with you as a female friend. I
Yeah.
think that is super, super, super healing for women in general.
Hmm.
Um, and we can talk about healing in many, many ways
Oh
and many,
yeah.
many ways, but I think sisterhood is really one of those modalities, connection, community, and sisterhood, which, you're so good at bringing into your business and you do a lot of connection and community and rituals and things like that. So yeah, that's very near and dear to my heart, especially the older I'm getting into my mid to late 30s and really wanting to make sure that that connection with these people in my life, especially women, is there, like that I have my village, so to speak.
Yes. Ah, that was so good. And I just wanted to, before I move into interrogating you on all your modalities and everything and your path, I did want to say it makes total sense that that would rear its head meeting new people. And I do feel like when we're, in new spaces, meeting new people, the inner child of wanting to be seen and understood and validated, and like, I want you to know who I am, prove myself like that. I don't know for you, but for me, like, definitely. And it's so cool over the years to watch that just settle down and be like, well, they'll get to know me eventually and they'll be probably like, it's all gonna come out if the relationship moves forward. So I don't need to feel this need to prove who I am right now or have them know everything about me. And so, but I that kind of resonated with me, that idea of meeting new people and feeling compelled to the ego popping up and the inner child wanting to be seen for who you are. So yeah, totally, totally. Okay, so from our retired party days, tell us a little bit more about how you kind of moved into the realm of like holistic healing and therapy, and you do a lot of like somatics work, and you're big, we talk a lot about spirituality. And so, can you share about how that unfolded for you? I know you were the funny thing is, even when you were drinking a lot, you were getting your master's in psychology, and I was drinking a lot when I was getting my master's in nutrition. And so, I would like to hear more about even that misalignment, how you rationalize that in your head. Because for me, that cognitive dissonance of studying nutrition and root cause healing while being a binge drinker was really uncomfortable and ultimately catalyzed my sober curiosity. But I'd love to hear how that process unfolded for you.
Oh my gosh, it's such a good question because the word misalignment could not be any more,
Yeah.
uh, perfect to
You're like
describe.
brain poison and psycho. And I'm like, poison for our body and nutrition.
Literally, literally. And and for me, so yeah, I was kind of getting a master's degree at the time and then once that subsided, I was also getting certified as a health coach. So I was
Yeah. Oh yeah, I
doing
forgot to mention.
psychology, then I was doing health coaching stuff. It was a whole period of so grad school was 3 years and then the I think the certification for health coaching took me a year and a half or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it was quite a long period at the same time as me still being pretty involved, living on Martha's Vineyard, pretty involved with partying life. I was a lifelong waitress and bartender. And so I was around alcohol a lot. For anybody who's worked in a restaurant industry, I mean, I'm sure you can relate. I actually eventually ended up really leaving that industry for that reason that I just really didn't want to be around it anymore. Um, it was so easily accessible to me everywhere I went. And as we know, alcohol is so normalized in our society. And so, everywhere you go, there are people drinking. It's just, if you want to drink, it's always there in some way, shape, or form, regardless of kind of like what environment you're in publicly. But at the time, so I was going to school. I was, waitressing a lot. I was trying to study all of these different concepts. And it's kind of interesting because I sort of think about my experience as being a little bit in a vacuum, and the reason I say that is because the graduate program that I went to was a summer residency program where I mostly learned online. It was a hybrid program, so I mostly learned online, but then in the summertime for 3 years, I would go to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and live there for I think it was 3.5 weeks, something like that, straight, and I would just do coursework for those 3.5 weeks. And so I was very much in like a little bit of a vacuum when I was going to classes during those residencies. And I think every time I went to go do that for 3 years in a row, I came out of that even more dysregulated than I went in. And the reason being is because I was having such a hard time integrating
Mm,
the knowledge that I was learning in graduate school about all kinds of things. My degree was in dance movement therapy and clinical mental health counseling. So I was learning and processing through dance and movement. I have a real connection to dance and movement in the body. I was learning that whole scope of things, which is its whole language in and of itself. And then I was learning clinical mental health, things like psychopathology and learning how to diagnose people and learning what mental illness looks like, which I have a totally different perspective on nowadays, but learning the classical clinical mental health kind of um, classes. And so I was having, long story short, I was having a really hard time trying to figure out how to fit all these pieces together. Like, how could I be this academic, higher version of myself that wanted to learn and be curious and understand the world and help people and be a counselor and also, understand dance and movement and how that related to people's mental health and whatnot, which later on turned into some more somatic therapy for me. But then how would I fit that into my life that was already very structured in this socialness of drinking and parties, and my identity was really kind of wrapped up in this world of like um of how I expressed myself socially in my social circles,
mm,
which actually had a lot to do with using alcohol at that time. Um, and so that was quite difficult. I was really juggling a lot. And I was also in such a busy time of my life that I was starting to realize as I went into grad school, I was so busy that I was starting to realize that there were just some things that I was going to have to give up or I was not going to make it through this program. Quite frankly, I mean, even the last year of my program, I had like, a little bit of like a mini sort of breakdown, if you will, because I was just so overwhelmed with the amount of responsibility I had on my plate. And I couldn't keep up with the constant ego-driven sense of wanting to be accepted by people socially. There was something really important about that for me. As like a little kid in a busy household with, three other siblings, a house of four, and lots going on in my childhood, I think there were moments where I didn't feel totally seen or heard. And so as I grew up, that theme just kind of really it showed itself again and again and again and again. And it kept coming up for me in the sense of if I felt, like our generation probably understands, huge like FOMO if I ever was declining an invitation to go be social with people. My identity was really wrapped up in how do others see me? Do
mhm.
they accept me? I am performing for these people to like me.
So
Most of my
exhausting.
Yeah, it was exhausting and I didn't understand what was going on at the time. I don't think I really had the wherewithal. It was brewing and budding inside of me, but I just don't think I had the wherewithal at the time to understand how much I was just living my life for the sake of other people to think I was cool in some capacity or interesting or funny or whatever it was. So it was, I say this with a lot of love to myself, but it was very ego driven. It was really more about wanting to fit in, and I was willing to kind of sacrifice other parts of my life to keep that social piece going. And then there was kind of a breaking point where I realized like, oh, I really can't do that anymore if I'm going to continue to get this degree. um, and at the time, I was really having a hard time sitting with those parts of myself that I didn't like, right? So like nowadays, especially in sort of like a Jungian perspective, like a Jungian psychology perspective, we would call that like your shadow side, right? The pieces of yourselves of yourself that you really just don't want to look at. I had a lot of those pieces. I had a lot of behaviors and social tendencies that I was kind of embarrassed of, but I didn't really understand what to even do about that. And, what does that mean? And like you mentioned earlier, the cognitive dissonance of realizing that what you thought was true for a really long time is no longer true can be so disorienting for people. It was really disorienting for me that it took me a long time to understand and kind of mature. I mean, I had to be forced into a lot of this maturity, if
Yeah.
I'm being honest. And what it looked like for me was trying to balance, especially once I was done grad school, I made it through that. And then I was decided I needed more because I have many, many interests. For anybody who knows astrology, I'm a Gemini rising and a Gemini sun, and I have Gemini at another placement in my chart. I have like an insatiable quest for knowledge. I just always have since I've been a child. And I knew I needed more. Psychology was great, dance movement therapy was great. I learned so much. I was so challenged, but I knew there was a piece about health and nutrition and wellness that I really wanted to be connected to. And at the time, our really dear and lovely mutual friend Erica was my roommate on Martha's Vineyard, and I was living with her. And shout out to Erica McIntosh. My gosh, she is a wealth of knowledge. I feel like I got like an OG certification about health and wellness from Erica because I was living with her and she was always much more conscious about her health than I was. And I
Especially
started,
then, like, right. You like now is like more on the same page, but then and you were
yeah,
living together.
we were living together. I was like, it was like a course, it was like a 101 course. Like I was getting, she had all these amazing supplements and all of these things she was doing. Anyway, it was just, I learned a lot from her. And she also went to school to be a health coach or, yeah, a
Yeah,
health
yeah.
coach. And so I was really surrounded by this energy with her. And then there were some other people and mentors in my life. One of them being my mother, who has constantly my whole life been really, really conscious about health. I mean, I've considered myself really lucky to have grown up in a household where my mom was doing things like practicing homeopathic remedies, when I was a kid and, was really kind of looked at as like the earthy, crunchy mom. But I'm so grateful to her now because I learned so much about alternative forms of wellness and medicine and eating healthy. She was always baking breads and, doing all kinds of stuff when we were kids. So I had these influences around me, and I was still went to grad school, finished that, then decided I needed more to go to do this health coaching piece. Once I got into the health coaching piece, things really started to kind of like explode for me. The grad school thing, I kind of still had like a little bit of a top, like a lid on the,
I cannot with how parallel our stories are. The mom, the masters not really being that like conducive to, not being the catalyst we thought it was. And then the health coaching being where things really started falling into place and the
yeah,
cognitive
yeah.
dissonance and the discomfort and like really realizing who you are versus who you're trying to be for the outside world. And there's just so much
Yes.
overlap. But finish what you were saying. I want to.
So much over. No, I know it's fascinating just to see how much overlap there is. I think that's why we've really resonated and connected so much with each other. But yeah, grad school, like it was sort of like it was sort of shaking up the soda can, if you will, and building pressure, like for me to really have to look at these parts of myself. But it was really the health coaching training where it like the lid was off the bottle and everything was starting to explode. And at the same time, I was in a relationship that was, let's just say the person I was with was really drinking a lot more than even I was. And so I was having to really look at my discomfort around that. I also grew up in a household where there was alcoholism, and I was really heavily aware of that growing up. And my adult self was very aware that I could have alcoholic tendencies if I didn't get this under wraps. I kind of consciously knew that, but subconsciously, swept it under the rug for a long time. Then health coaching school was like, you can't sweep this under the rug anymore. Because at the time, and I remember having lots of phone calls with my mom at that time in my life saying like, I was getting these chronic bouts of like getting just feeling like I had a cold all the time or just like deep fatigue
Mm.
and just feeling like all kinds of random symptoms, digestive stuff, really feeling almost like feverish at times, like lots of little bouts of things like that that were very recurring. And what was going on in my life at the time? Well, I was still partying, I was still drinking quite a bit, and I was working a lot, which is not abnormal for somebody in their mid 20s. I'm not saying don't work, but I was in total burnout mode. I also at the time was just kind of getting to a place where I was starting to accept that like I needed to eat healthy like a lot of the time, not just some of the time. I needed to actually like really kind of cut a lot of things out of my diet that my body, hated. And so there was a lot of things happening in terms of my health. Nothing that ever thankfully brewed into anything bigger than just kind of annoying bouts of sickness here and there. But it was chronic and frequent enough that there was a little voice inside of me that was going, something is not right here.
Yeah.
Like, and I would have these conversations with my mother, who really believes in root cause healing, which is one of the main reasons why I do everything I do nowadays from a root cause perspective. All
Yep.
the services that I offer, I really come from that place. That's kind of the binding theme in all of the services that I offer. And she would say to me, Chloe, I hate to tell you this, but are you partying a lot? Are you drinking alcohol a lot? Because that's going to really deplete your immune system and you're probably not going to feel very good if you're doing that regularly. And I remember being on the phone with her and being like, yeah, 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 mom, I get it. Like, I know it's not good for you because I knew, right? Most people
Yeah.
know that
Yeah.
alcohol is not good for us. We know that, but we justify it, right? We justify it. We have this conversation with ourselves that it's fine this time, right? Until this time turns into, a million more times, and then there's no structure or boundary around the behavior. And that's really what was happening for me. So it was a big mixture of being really confronted,
Yeah.
really confronted by my own shit, so to speak, really confronted by the shadow parts of me that I did not want to look at all. I did not want to accept that I could have alcoholic tendencies. I did not want to accept that my body felt like it was kind of breaking down on me. I did not want to accept that I had to like eat clean and be more conscious and like get up early and go exercise when I was still trying to sleep off my hangover. I did not want to accept any of those things that I had to do. Those parts of me had to become more meaningful than the parts of me that wanted to socially fit in.
Yeah, you have to commit more to yourself than the version of yourself that's showing up for other people. And that
Yes.
was definitely a turning point for me too. And with everything you're saying, what the other thing about that piece with, confronting the impact that like alcohol or diet is having on your health choices, but then there's also the psychological distress that happens within us when we're actively acting in ways that are not in alignment with the awareness we're gaining, the consciousness we're gaining, the wisdom we're learning. It's a super uncomfortable psychological place to be, too, not to mention a toxic relationship and navigating new identity and all of those things in conjunction with, you know, physical health. It's just a lot. And the analogy of shaking up the soda can is so good. Just the increasing pressure of developing awareness. And it speaks so much to, it's not just awareness that you need because look at us. We were literally paying thousands of dollars to get master's degree in psychological health and physical health. And still we were not making choices. It definitely accelerated my process of change by saturating my brain with information that was going to be pushing me towards my highest self. But ultimately, it really is this process of getting uncomfortable enough to actually commit to the changes you deep down know you need. But I think it's probably really validating for people to hear from us. It was still very hard even getting a master's in these areas. And, on top of that, the expectation of our society and the pace at which we live is very conducive to wanting to numb and check out. Even when you are getting degrees, look at doctors and the expectations placed on them. They're supposed to be helping us with optimal physical health, yet, their residencies and schooling is so overwhelming that there's just no possible way that they can really be in an optimal state of balance themselves. So there's so many layers and themes of, that the increasing awareness is not the only thing. It's this switch and this tipping point that you need to get to where the absorption of information finally overshadows and tips the scale enough to take action. And that's so important, and and such an important reminder to be gentle with ourselves along the way, because I think we can beat ourselves up when we know what we should be doing and we're not doing it, but continuing to stay curious and less about why am I not doing this thing I know I need to be like I'm not doing it. It's more like, well, why am I not doing it? What blocks are here? What societal conditioning am I really holding on to around my drinking? What version of myself is literally trying to die so that another one can be birthed? Where am I in active resistance with the person I want to be? And choosing actively against that version of myself. And that is so confrontive. It really is. And it demands that certain people need to go, certain habits need to go, certain ways that we've gotten so familiar with living and relating to ourselves and other people need to go. And that's why it can be such like a crumbling for a lot of people and uh, a real time of sort of unrest and upheaval in our lives as we're really coming to terms with, oh shit, like there's no shortcuts here. I actually do have to dig in and deal with this shit and make real change if I actually ever want a shot at being the person my soul truly wants me to be in this life. And one thing I remember us talking about, and I kind of want to get into your sober curious journey a little, is you talked in there about how, you were in a relationship with a heavy drinker at the time of your health coaching program and really going into starting to really feel like you were starting to really make tangible changes in your life that were out of alignment with your environment and the people in your life at that point. You were still living on the vineyard. I think from our own speaking, you were still trying to fit in a lot with people who were drinking heavily. And one thing you told me about that really I related to, and I bet a lot of other people can, is just that overcompensation and early sober curiosity where you're like, I'll be the DD and I'll be the sober one for all these drunk people. And I totally did that too, where I was so committed to being like the cool, sober person in the eyes of my drinking friends. And that was even, after I'd committed and letting old versions of myself die. But there was still that people pleasing and wanting to fit in and be accepted, even as I knew I was making choices that were kind of going against the people around me but serving me best. So tell us more about how you navigated that transition and how it felt for you going through that.
It's such a good question because I actually reflect on this part of my life a lot. I love that you talked about the overcompensation piece because I completely did that. I was in this relationship with this person who is a wonderful person, but the dynamics were just, they were turning into a space where I knew like eventually I kind of had an inkling that this relationship wasn't going to last. Um, but there was a lot of challenges just in that because I was justifying my love for this person and realizing that actually we weren't very compatible in a lot of ways. We weren't really on a parallel kind of path to the same direction. And so because of that, I overcompensated a lot. I was the girlfriend that would be like, I'll be the DD, I'll drive you and all of your drunk friends around so that everybody will still think that I'm cool and will still accept me and will not think that I'm being too weird. I remember the first year that I decided to kind of like take alcohol. It was never fully out, but it was, let's say it was about 80% out of my life at that point. There were still times where I would have a drink here and there, but considering it was a huge shift for me at that time where back in the day, I would have been drinking, probably several times per week, going out with friends.
Mhm.
And so at the time, I remember being out at the bars, being the DD, being the sober person, and my friends kind of looking at me like, "Why aren't you drinking?" And it was difficult for me because I constantly felt like I had to be either defensive of myself, of like my reasoning for not wanting to drink, or there was a part of me that just kind of would shy away and didn't even want to answer anybody's questions because I wasn't sure how to navigate through those conversations. I remember feeling really awkward. I remember my boyfriend at the time kind of referring to me as like an angel for like driving all of us around. And I remember having an epiphany one day and being like, yeah, why am I doing that? He kind of looked at me and was like, you're an angel. Like thanks for doing that. You didn't have to do that. And I thought to myself, he's right. I don't have to do this. Why am I doing this? There was a lot of little pings, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of little pings that kind of came and hit me, whether they were subtle or sometimes they hit me really hard, which, felt like they really hit me over the head. Like the messages were either like, really smacking me over the head, or they were very subtle and they happened in my quiet moments. And there were moments of me being like, oh, I don't actually have to do that to fit
Yeah.
in. And since then, I don't know, 10 years later or whatnot, I've had so many more of those softer pings. I mean, sure, the universe still hits me over the head metaphorically sometimes when
You're
I'm
more
not
in alignment now, so it doesn't need to give you some
right.
backhands as aggressively. It's like
Yeah.
gentle
Sometimes we
guidance.
need
Keep going, honey. When back then it's like, bitch, are you
yeah,
listening?
a lot of that. Like, are you gonna listen anytime
We tried
soon?
the subtle pings now. We have the megaphone and a brick to drop on
Yes.
your head.
We have a two by four and we're coming to get you. And I had a lot of two by fours back then kind of hit me in the head. And then again, like as time has gone on, I've listened to some of those. The messages are still there, but they're a little subtler. They're a little bit less disruptive. But I think we all get those pings. It's just a process of figuring out like what's my relationship to learning to listen to my own intuition. That's a process. It's a question that a lot of clients that I work with ask me all the time. And I would just say the long and short of that is it's a process. You learn how to listen to that over time. I think we all have an ability to listen to our intuition, but a lot of us are not listening because of
When you
outside.
clear out the noise, which can be distractions, drinking, self-medicating, but also you gather positive reinforcement by listening to your intuition, being like, okay, listen, like I went out on a limb and listened to not drinking, and now that has propelled me to a state of clarity, but also more faith in my intuition. And the more faith you have, the more you learn to tune in and realize, okay, this is guiding me to pretty good places. Maybe I should stop like actively resisting what I already know to be true. And one thing you were saying too, that this thought came up in my mind that, as a lot of, I know talking to so many women who overindulge or self-medicate with alcohol, there's so many common themes. Perfectionism is one, trauma, obviously, but also this people-pleasing tendency. And I feel like that theme is definitely existent in yours and trying to fit in and be liked. And so many times, I think that people pleasing is why we overindulge. It's also why we're so afraid to let alcohol go because of who we may lose. And so often we think when we lose people in our life, it's an indication that like something is wrong with us. But I also feel that what we don't realize is sometimes people walk away because we're at a higher frequency than they are. And we don't resonate. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It's actually like they can feel it too, even if it's subconsciously. And it's really uncomfortable if they're not ready to look at that. And so recognizing that people walking out of your life, maybe you are clinging on to people in your life because of not you specifically, but in general, people in our lives because we want that acceptance, we want people pleasing, but sometimes we don't resonate because we're actually like moving to a higher calling or a higher wavelength or a higher frequency, not to be hierarchical or anything, but
Mhm. Yeah.
often we look at it as a failing, and it's not always. Sometimes it's clearing space for where we need to go. And
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big believer nowadays that any form of what feels like rejection and looks like rejection is really just redirection to another path that you're more aligned to be on.
Mhm.
That relationship I was in, that person ended up breaking up with me, and it was really devastating for me at the time. There were misalignments happening consistently, for about, probably a 2 year period until, again, I got kind of hit by the metaphorical two by four from the universe to say, hey, you got to get out of here. This isn't aligned anymore. And it wasn't because this person wasn't a good person. He's a wonderful person. It was just because we weren't aligned. That's really it.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just the answer, that we're just not on the same path. And I think he knew that. I knew that. I was the clinger. I was the clinger.
Yeah.
100%. It's a really good reminder for people. You're spot on when you were bringing that up. I was really so indulged in people pleasing behavior. For many reasons, again, just being like a little kid who didn't get all of her needs met and not feeling heard and seen and those kinds of things, and really identifying my sense of self to how people um, saw me. That
Yeah.
was really my most important um, priority at that time in my life, was making sure, me trying to control and manipulate, that people thought I was good or smart or cool
It's
or
so
interesting.
It's also so wild too how when we're in that state of kind of desperate validation seeking, how we literally attract people who are unsupportive, invalidating, don't honor us, don't respect us. Like that energy attracts people who exacerbate the wound. And it's so clear. I see it now so much in the friendships I was chasing before, being like, why aren't they supportive? Why aren't they this? It's like it was perpetuating like them, like that power that people have. It's a power dynamic that like certain energies draw in, and when you just release that need for validation, or it's almost like you then attract it from the right people who are just more ready and willing to give it to you than you could ever imagine. And so it's so beautiful to see how detachment impacts attraction of alignment. And
Mhm.
one other thing you were saying too about the misalignment between you and the partner is like we're so afraid of the acute pain of going through lack of control and an outcome that we aren't wanting or desiring. It's like you kind of, you're so afraid of that acute pain that you're willing to maybe go through a lifetime of misalignment. And I talk to people about that all the time with alcohol and processing. It's like it's so scary to give it up and face what you need to face in order for it to be sustainable. But the alternative is a lifetime of reliance on a numbing coping technique that's really not allowing you to process any of the lessons that can take you to the next level in your life. And
Mhm.
similarly to any outcome we're attached to that we think is, because we're scared about the uncertainty or something, that the mystery of not knowing, it's like, yeah, but then there's the certainty of misery.
Yes.
Wouldn't we rather be open to the possibility of fulfillment, joy, and happiness, and at least moving in that trajectory than staying in the familiarity of, I hate my life and I'm not where I want to be, and I don't know if this relationship is right. It doesn't feel right. I'm forcing myself to stay in the familiar at the cost of what's possible.
And I had to it's beautiful that you're talking about that, because there is kind of like a give and take to these conversations, to these life experiences. You do have to kind of be willing, and you have to know, anybody who's on sort of like a wellness healing journey, whatever you want to call it, a sense of enlightenment towards your better, not even better, but just more evolved, growing self. There are going to be things that you have to let go of. You just have to. It's purely just, it's the laws of the universe. You can't hold on to everything on your way to who you are becoming. And the reason being is because those things are just not meant for you anymore. People come into our lives for moments and periods and phases, and they teach us what we need, and it might feel or look like heartbreak. For me, it's been a lot of heartbreak of either romantic relationships ending, or realizing that friendships have not been, kind of what I would have liked them to be, as I get into my, mid to late 30s. And so there is a lot that we have to let go of. I think that's probably been one of the best lessons for me at this point in my journey is realizing that if there is something that feels unaligned, the best thing you could actually do is let it go and deal with the grief that comes up with that, because there will be grief. There will inevitably be grief. All of life is a process of grief in a way, because everything is an ending and a beginning. So grief, unfortunately, we don't talk about it very much in our society, but grief is important for people to understand because it's a huge part of people's journey, especially if you're someone listening and you're, thinking about the things that Katie talks so much about sober curiosity and giving up your relationship to alcohol. I really had to grieve that like party girl version of Chloe. I really had to grieve her. And I still grieve her sometimes
Yeah,
when
me
some
too.
when somebody offers me a cocktail, at a beach party or something. I was just at a 4th of July party and
Or should I just go feral right fucking now?
right. Like, should I just go back and meet that party girl Chloe immediately? Because it would be so easy for me to do that. And I don't, I check in with myself. I ask myself, do I really want to make that choice right now? And it doesn't mean that I can never have a drink ever again in my life. There are some people who make that choice, and I really respect and honor them for that. And I have made that choice for many, many times and years and phases. I think it's more about checking in with myself in that moment when somebody offers that to me and I get immediately kind of triggered back to that old version of me that's like, ooh, like maybe I will have a drink, maybe I won't. But the slope is slippery.
Yeah.
The slope is slippery. And so I know that about myself and I work constantly to have kind of like an open dialogue with that part of me. But I grieve her all the time. I grieve that part of me that maybe wants to fit in when somebody asks me if I want a cocktail. And then I remind myself, no, I can fit in being just who I am. And if I don't fit in, then these are not my people. Because actually the objective is no longer really about fitting in. It's about fitting with others. It's about fitting in with me.
Mm.
Like I've been so concerned about the people pleasing and, trying to make sure and kind of control and manipulate subconsciously, because people who people please, they try to control and manipulate subconsciously. We're not
Yeah.
doing this consciously, right? We're not malicious people, but we are trying to control and manipulate the scenario of how people see us. And
Right.
actually, it's not something that we can control. And when I finally realized, it took me many, many times and still have to remind myself to have that epiphany that, oh, I can't control how so and so thinks about me, or I can't control how this new woman that I just met, might have viewed me in the way that I was talking about myself. Once I realized that I really cannot control that, and again, that's a constant reminder, a constant process, I've been able to let go of that people pleaser version even more, even more, even more. She still pops up quite a bit, but she's not the dominant force anymore. She's not like my one of my mentors, Tiana says, she's not riding the bus. She's not driving the
Right.
bus of your life
It's
anymore. Like she's sitting in the back seat now. She's not
Ah,
driving.
Greg, I love you back there. I know what you're trying to do. It's so funny you said that. I swear I've had this conversation like 3 times in the past week between clients and peers about, this process of it's not like the silencing of the inner gremlin. It is the integration and awareness of the inner gremlin that actually quiets the inner gremlin because it's for so long she's running the show subconsciously. But then as you grow and heal and realize, oh, that voice is coming from impulse or wounding or just habit and patterns, and then you can like laugh at her. I remember when I was in Italy, I think I told you just like, I was obviously traveling with a toddler, emotional bandwidth was running low, and I'm surrounded by wine and like this beautiful Tuscany and whatnot. And I remember there was like one specific instance where John and I went out with Arthur to like a little pizzeria and they just handed us bubbly like champagne, and I'm so far past any real desire to drink, but it was almost like this voice, like this impulse, intrusive thought, like I could rip that out of his hand and like chug that champagne, like smash the flute on the ground. It's like obviously I'm not gonna do that, but it's just like I kind of just like laughed at myself and went about my day. Whereas I think, and that can be true with so many kind of intrusive thoughts or subconscious impulses we have when you normalize that voice and just kind of integrate it as, name it, integrate it, accept it and realize like, yeah, I'm obviously not gonna let that fool run the show, but like she's kind of funny.
Exactly. And I have compassion for her. You have
Yeah.
compassion for the part of you that, might have in a previous version chugged that whole bottle of champagne. And I have compassion for the party girl version of me too, because she didn't know any better. She was just trying to be loved and accepted. And really, in a lot of ways, she was just trying to protect herself from any form of rejection, which humans do naturally. We all try to protect ourselves from rejection, whether it's just like the mental, emotional rejection that can feel like rejection of people looking at you weird if they realize that you're not somebody that just like says yes to every glass of champagne that somebody offers you. I mean,
Yeah.
it does take that's thankfully becoming more normalized, I would say, like mocktails and things like that, and restaurants and whatnot, and the culture of not drinking and sober curiosity through people like yourself. But I would say there's still an overwhelming, stigma associated
Yeah.
to not drinking and, detaching from a sense of a substance use lifestyle.
Right. I totally agree. And I don't know if you've found this, and I know we have to wrap up soon, but if you've found like the less, the more you detach from controlling people's perception of you, almost the more they accept you as you are because it translates as somebody who's comfortable in their own skin as opposed to seeking approval. And it's funny, I've realized through my own kind of just layers of awareness development and getting more comfortable in who I am and that kind of identification of need for acceptance and validation and recognizing that any form of rejection is redirection and just being at peace with, hey, if you like don't resonate with me because I'm too spiritual for you or I'm too alternative health and I'm not into certain things you're into or just different aspects of my lifestyle, or I'm releasing the need to be understood by the wrong people is so relieving. But it's funny because almost people I never expect that I'm almost like, oh, they probably won't resonate with me. They're like, so, like, hmm, I've been doing breath work, or like they'll bring, and I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have even thought to talk to you about this. I kind of just accepted our relationship as it was, and honestly, just gave up on you giving a shit about that part of me. And then it's like suddenly it's this energetic shift of detachment where you're not trying to prove yourself and suddenly people are more curious and validating.
I've had that
No.
experience too so many times. It's so funny because there's a big part of me that was getting really triggered for a long time about even just like old friends or people that I've known for a really long time, not wanting to maybe know more about like this newer version of me that like, I don't know, like is a therapist and has all of these, I have a million different interests and things going on all at all times. But I started to realize there really are people that come out of the woodwork that start to ask you questions about the various things that you're interested in. And I agree with you. You will meet people in whether they're people you already know or random people. I have had the experience of people I know just kind of like, making their way into my life and being like, "Oh my God, you do this thing? I didn't know you did this thing. Can you tell me more about it?" Or, I had no idea that you like tarot cards or whatever it is, right? And then people do find their way to you. I think a lot
Mhm.
of that process, especially like healing that people pleaser tendency and that codependent tendency, which, I didn't really phrase it that way, but a lot of it is codependency and kind of wanting to like fix what other people are working on, or, fix and control and manipulate how other people see me or what they are focused on in their life, the healing journey that they're on. That's a whole other story. But, it really comes down to this experience that the people that are meant to be in your path will find you organically.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot to do with trusting that sense and healing that people pleaser and saying, yeah, I just don't need to prove myself to anybody anymore. Which is really, again, a lifelong journey. I'm sure there will be many, many days for the rest of my life where that will come up and that will be something I'll have to work on. But now I have the wherewithal and the understanding and the sense of insight to just say, oh, that thing is happening again right now. I'm feeling triggered, like I'm feeling like I need to fit in and I'm feeling like I want to be understood. And I'm feeling like that person didn't really understand me and it feels icky and I don't, I'm not being portrayed in the way that I would want to be portrayed and all these things that I can't control. And
Yeah.
when you just take a breath and literally, and this goes back to just like some of the work that I do now of like somatic therapy and connecting with the body and movement and all kinds of stuff that I do. But, one of the biggest practices that I think I teach clients and that I use daily in my own life is just pausing, putting your hands on your body, pausing, taking a big deep breath, and checking in with myself. Like, not
Yeah.
from a place of ego, but from a place of like, how is my mind and my body kind of aligning right now? Like, how's my body feeling about this new woman that I just met in this social circle that I feel kind of icky around?
Yeah.
Like,
Why
what do
is
I,
that? Yeah.
why is that happening? Is it like a reminder of just previous,
Is this intuition or past wounding?
right, right. Is it
Yeah.
intuition or past winning? And a lot of times, sometimes it can be intuition. Like sometimes I get an intuitive hit about someone that I'm like, I don't mesh with your energy. And that's okay too. I think people have to listen to that. I'm a big believer of like, give people some chances to get to know them. But then listen to that hit if there's
Yeah.
something that
Because other
resonates with
people
you about
have weird false pretenses they're putting up too sometimes when you first meet them. You're like, you're kidding me. And it's like, who knows? Maybe they have their own weird projecting at first. And that development of interoception, of really being able to explore our inner landscape and connect to where we're at mentally, emotionally, and physically, and take inventory of it is something I talk about a lot with clients too, because with the process of self-medication, as you know, I think a lot of people just get really disconnected to even physiological signs of stress and their inner landscape in general. How am I feeling emotionally right now? And I just did a mother's circle recently, and we were talking about that process of tuning into our escalating overwhelm as it's escalating. I think many of us aren't taught how to speak that language with ourselves. Or just go from, I'm fine, and then like, I'm not fine. I'm losing my shit. And then we're trying to apply, breath work and meditation to that stage instead of practicing it along the in our everyday lives to help build the muscle, but also in the escalation of stress too. We don't really do a very good job of teaching people how to tune in to their like bodily, mental, and emotional cues around.
yeah, absolutely. And I always tell people that I work with that we have to remember that we live in a cognitive based society. We don't live in a body based society. I mean, we think about the body in terms of external validation and how people look, but
Mhm.
that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a sense of internal embodiment, a sense of connecting to your body. What does that even mean? Most people don't know what that means because, like you're talking about, it's very foreign. It's not
Yeah.
common knowledge. We're not taught that.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, and this is no fault to any parent out there in the world, but ideally, all adult parents would know how to connect to their body. And then when they're raising kids, they would know how to encourage their kiddos to connect to their body, right? Like that's an idea, that's a utopia that doesn't exist. But what we can do is educate ourselves, at least start with you and notice what's going on for me right now. Do I feel like tension in my chest? Do I feel tightness in my throat? I mean, I know for me, when I'm having a really difficult time emotionally, there'll be a tightness in my throat. There'll be a feeling going on in there like I can't quite speak, right? For anybody who's ever had experience where you speak and you start to cry, right? It's like
Oh,
that's a
yeah.
really good reminder that you have some truth that needs to come out. Maybe something needs to be verbally expressed because your mind and your body are not separate. We know this now. Everything is connected. And so what's going on in the body is I like to think about it as like a whole other language that we just really, unfortunately, haven't really been taught, but fortunately, we can learn. And so, somatic therapy, dance movement therapy, breath work, fascia maneuvers, there's so many ways to figure out that connection to your body. But really, the most basic thing I think we could probably recommend to people is just pause, take a deep breath, notice. Literally just notice, which by the way is very hard for a lot of people to do because it's very confronting, right? To just notice these little nuances that are happening in ourselves, not just the thoughts happening in your head, but the feeling going on in the body. Like for me, a lot of my life, it's been a stomach ache. You know, if I was upset about something, I had a stomach ache. That's still pretty true nowadays for me. So if I have physical symptoms like that, it's a good sign for me to look around and to go like, okay, what's going on in my life? Am I stressed because of this or that? Or what is my body kind of responding to? But I think it takes practice and awareness. And I love that idea of like thinking about like when you're on the way to being escalated, like how are you doing? Like, do you have a process of checking in? And most of us, because life is so busy, we don't even have a process of checking in because we've never been taught to do that. So it's wonderful that people like yourself are really learning how to work with people to encourage them to create and kind of like have a blueprint for what is your process for checking in for yourself. With the clients I work with, that looks different for all different kinds of people. You know,
Yeah.
for me, this thing to do is like pause and take a deep breath. I think that's a quote unquote simple and doable way for me to check in with my body.
Mhm.
But then it takes time. Later on, I have to like go and reflect and maybe talk to a girlfriend or talk to a therapist or talk to a trusted person that I love that I can bounce those ideas off of, right? It's not as simple as just that breath, checking in and taking a breath, but it can be that simple to start, So I think people can get overwhelmed with like, well, all of these concepts that we're talking about, but it can be very, very simple to start. Pausing, taking a deep breath, checking in with yourself, noticing if you have any like feelings going on in your body and what might that be representative of. That's been really revolutionary for me. And dating back to some of the stories I've shared, today, those were some of like the moments where I realized like something is not right here. Something needs to change for me because either my body doesn't feel well or I'm getting sick a lot or I'm getting this constant feeling that I'm not in the right place or these relationships are not aligned or that I have to let go of something in order to receive something else in the future. All your body will really talk to you in those moments and it doesn't it's challenging to go through those things because there's a lot of emotional pieces connected to it, but I would say it's actually really rewarding when you
Liberating.
it's very liberating. That's probably the better word. Very liberating because
Rewarding is a good one.
it's like shedding any sense of extra weight that you have been carrying around, the
Yeah.
constant chronic people-pleasing tendencies of again needing to control how people see me.
Yeah.
Letting that go has been like putting down a heavy backpack that I've been carrying my whole life. And
Yeah.
again, pops up sometimes, but you connect with those parts and like you said earlier, you don't shun them and make them feel bad and talk shit about those parts of you that you don't like, those shadow parts of you that you don't like, but you learn to accept them. You learn to have compassion for them. You
And to
learn.
choose like your highest self in spite of like what, the gremlin might be saying or yeah, for me and what I continue to observe is that it simplistically just all circles back to um an end goal of just being enough, like as we are, and just being able to show up without all of this baggage attached to like, how is this person going to see me? How might they judge me? Okay, I want to be liked. I need to be heard. It's just realizing like I get to just be. And I just get to be, and the right people will be attracted to me, and just kind of stay in my lane and work on what I'm working on and draw in the life I want to draw in. And that's the end goal for me has just been like becoming more and more magnetic towards the life I want and doing so in a way that feels continuously more filled with ease than force or resistance.
Yeah, and really like aligning with the things that feel good to you. I think a lot of previous versions of myself, I was like also doing things or spending time with people or doing events and things that I didn't even want to be doing. So spending more time doing the things that matter to me, even if that
Right.
means people don't understand why I'm doing those things or what the hell I'm studying this year. You know what I mean? I mean, there's lots of people that wouldn't resonate with me on a lot of the things that I believe in. That's okay, but they're meaningful to me. And I think that has been very liberating as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh my God, I have like a million more questions, but obviously we can't talk all day. So, one thing I always like asking, and especially in the context of our conversation, is one piece of advice that you would give to party girl Chloe from
Mm.
your seat today.
Oh, it's such a great question. I think probably, it's funny, like there's a double-edged sword here because the advice I want to give the younger party girl Chloe is also probably the medicine that I needed at the time. Like I want to say to her, stop seeking external validation, right? But I sort of had to do that in order to get to the other side. So
Mm,
I'm a big believer of, if I don't wish suffering on anybody, but I really do feel that a lot of life is a form of suffering and we learn through those experiences. Lessons is probably a better word than suffering. Suffering can be really
yeah. But
very
it
Bu-
is. It's hard
a very
sometimes to
Buddhist
know.
way to look at it. But it did feel like suffering. A lot of those moments felt like suffering. I think I would really tell her, like you are just cool as you are. You don't have to be anything that you're actually truly not. And I think I also would tell her to be patient because that was probably the hardest lesson I had to learn on the whole journey was learning how to sit with a lot of uncomfortable feelings and just like be with them. I think that's one of the things I talk about so often with my clients. Often we think therapy is like going to fix our lives and of course we know that's not true and that the only person that can change our lives is us. But the hardest thing that people struggle the most with, and myself included, all of us humans, is to just sit with uncomfortable emotions and to just be present with them. And then later on, you act and you do things. But there is a process of just sitting and being and needing to just like know that you can tell yourself the truth in that moment, which is very, very uncomfortable. So yeah, I think I would tell her to stop seeking external validation and to be patient, that the process can feel slow and it can feel like you're, walking through the mud sometimes, and then it can feel so blissful and liberating.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, probably a lot of other pieces of advice in between there in
Yeah,
the,
that's a great one though, because I feel that the when you remind yourself that in sitting with it, you're truly overcoming it instead of procrastinating, sitting with it at a later date and not getting where you want to go in the meantime, then it kind of gives you that positive reinforcement to be like, well, this whole sitting with it lesson isn't going to go anywhere, and I'm just kind of putting off my potential growth in favor of continued unhappiness. Might as well just fucking sit with it, you know?
I know, I love that. It's like just the sitting with it is kind of the medicine. It's like I always say to people, you can do whatever you want later on with that. But right now, you're just building your awareness by just telling yourself the truth. And isn't that amazing? That the more you just sit, it's like you don't always have to do things in the moment. You can just sit and be in it, and that starts the ball rolling, even though it feels like you're stuck sometimes when you're just
Yeah,
sitting in your own stuff and your own awareness. But that's actually what's starting the process of movement, internal movement.
in
And
a
I
real
love
way.
in a real way. Yeah, in a
Yeah.
way where you really have to tell yourself the truth and you're finally sitting with the truth. And then once you have the truth, it's like you can't unsee what you've seen.
Yeah, the acknowledgement of the truth and then being able to be like, okay, now what do I want to do with this? We're just so addicted to doing and like, okay, now what are we gonna do? How are we gonna fix this? It's like sometimes you can't take any shortcuts. And the more you sit with it, the more insight, wisdom, and information you gain as to your next move in a more intentional way. And so, yeah, I love that. And so, in closing, where can people find you? I know you said you just updated your website, so share that, Instagram, all the things.
I know this conversation was a good incentive to revamp my website. And yeah, so people can find me on Instagram. I'm mostly just on Instagram these days. There will be a future YouTube channel. Stay tuned for that. Instagram at introspective_living. If you want to follow along with any of the dance movement stuff I do, you can follow me at Shine Fitness with Chloe. And so the website will be introspective-living.com. And there's all kinds of information about the other things that I offer there. And yeah, looking forward to connecting with anybody. And one last little plug, because I'm in this tarot card reading process right now where I'm learning to be a tarot card reader. If anybody is listening and has any interest in that and wants a complimentary tarot card reading, feel free to send me an email off my website and I would love to provide one for you.
Yeah, I'm first in line though, bitches.
Katie's first in line.
No
I'm
cutting. I'm just
nominating
kidding.
everybody else.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here, Chloe. I'm so glad that we made this happen. I will definitely have be reconvening for more podcasts to come over the years. So much solidarity and sisterhood. And thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I just love and adore you so much, and I love your podcast. I love all the things that you're doing and all the energy that you represent. I really appreciate having somebody like you in my life, in my circle. So thank you for having me. Love
Yeah,
you so much.
love you. Bye, everyone.